some of you have met me before many times. I'm Linda Howell. I'm the Acting Division Director of the NRC's Region 4 office out of Arlington, Texas. And my division has oversight responsibility for San Onofre Nuclear Generating Station. I want to thank everybody for attending this evening.
Let's hold the mic a little closer.
Is that better? Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate that. So what we're going to do to start out the meeting this evening is lay out a little bit of logistical information about how we plan to conduct the meeting. As far as the NRC's presentation goes, we're going to try and keep that to a minimum while sharing the information that we know that we need to share with you and maximize your opportunity to interact with us through either sharing your comments, opinions, or questions. And I'm going to turn the meeting over to start with to Mr. Chip Cameron, to my left. Chip is going to serve as the facilitator for the public portion of the meeting, and he's going to describe a little bit of what you might expect in terms of our trying to ensure that as many people as possible get to speak this evening. So, Chip, if you want to go ahead and take it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Linda, and thank all of you for being here tonight with us. And as Linda mentioned, I'm going to serve as the facilitator for the meeting tonight. And in that role, I'm going to try to help all of you and the NRC to have a productive meeting tonight. And two of the things that I will do specifically is try to keep the meeting flowing and to gently remind you to follow the speaking time guidelines, and I'll get to those in a minute. I'll also pay attention to whether the NRC has clearly answered your questions. And we're going to begin with some brief remarks by the NRC staff, including Linda Howell, and she'll introduce the rest of her colleagues. And they're going to be talking about the ongoing fuel transfer operations at SOMS. And then we're going to go out to all of you for questions and or comments for the NRC. And we're going to start with elected officials, federal and local government people who might want to talk. And then we're going to go to a representative of Southern California Edison, the licensee, and also to the vice chair of the community engagement panel. And we're putting them on at the beginning so that you have that information in your minds when you get up to ask questions or comments. So when we get to the comment question period, everybody is going to be limited to 3 minutes. That's the speaking guideline. And
is that the same for SCE? Is they limited to 3 minutes as well?
Pardon me?
I asked you before if SCE was going to be featured. You said no. Is SCE going to be limited to 3 minutes as well?
Yes,
okay,
absolutely.
Thank you.
So we're all following the 3-minute guideline, and when you get to 3 minutes, we have a timer that's going to be shown on the screen. And when you get to 3 minutes, there's not going to be a trap door that opens beneath you that puts you out on the sidewalk like they do in the cartoons. But I'll ask you to finish your sentence or whatever. And if you ask a question, give it all when you get up there for your 3 minutes. If you have a comment, put that in there. If you have questions for the NRC staff, ask those questions. And we'll go to the NRC staff for answers to the questions. And then I'm going to ask you if you have any follow-up after you've heard the answer to that question. And that's basically to get that follow-up, if you have one, on the record. We're not going to go into a discussion of it, but it gets it on the record. And we're doing 3 minutes so that we give everybody a chance to talk tonight. And that's the most important thing, is to hear from all of you what your concerns are, what your advice is for the NRC staff. So I'm going to call your names when we get to that portion of the meeting, and I would just ask you to come up to this podium and address the NRC staff. And we put the podium like this, obviously for one reason, to face the NRC staff, but also so the speaker would not have their back to the audience, so that they could turn and look out and at all of you. And that's why that is being done that way. And let's see what else we need to think about. We're supposed to go from 7 to 8:30, but if we need to extend for a half hour to get everybody in, we'll do that. And the NRC staff is going to be here at the close, after the formal close of the meeting. If you want to talk to them informally, they'll be here for a while. We're also going to put up a website where you can post additional comments or questions to the NRC. There is also a meeting evaluation form here, a hard copy, if you want to fill that out and leave it with us tonight. So, those are the ground rules. That's how we're going to do the meeting. So let's get started with the NRC staff. We're going to go to Linda Howell.
Hi, what I'd like to do is first have the NRC staff introduce themselves. I know we have several new faces in the audience, so some of you may not be familiar with all of our roles. I've already introduced myself, so let me just ask the gentleman to my left to introduce himself.
Thanks, Linda. I'm Scott Morris, and if you can see up there, you've got all our names and our titles up there. I'm sorry.
You can't see your face if you don't stand.
Oh, sure. I can stand. So I'm Scott Morris. I'm the Regional Administrator for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission in the Region 4 office, and you can see a picture of our geographic area of responsibility for the NRC. And we're based in Arlington, Texas. Go ahead.
Great.
Good evening. My name is Greg Warnick. I'm the Chief of the Reactor Inspection Branch, and I'm responsible for the inspection of spent fuel storage, decommissioning, and radiation protection at operating nuclear plants.
And good evening. I'm Chris Smith. I work for Greg. I also work out of the Arlington office. I'm a reactor inspector, and I also inspect SJC operations.
Thanks, everybody. So the purpose of tonight's meeting, we're trying to achieve a commitment that we made to the local public and communities, and that was to come and hold an independent meeting with all of you where we could, one, talk about some of the recent activities that we've been observing with regard to San Onofre resuming fuel transfer operations, and then secondly, provide you an opportunity to share with us your comments, your opinions, ask us questions in an independent forum. We heard from you, and we're trying to be responsive to your requests. So first, to kind of set the stage, and I'm not going to steal the thunder from my branch chief, Greg, here. You're all aware that back in the May timeframe, and we've discussed this during a couple of different public meetings in early June, the NRC told Southern California Edison that we believe that they could safely resume fuel transfer operations. At that time, we initiated and we discussed during an early June webinar a number of activities that Southern California Edison had described to us that they needed to do before they were ready to resume fuel transfer operations. Our staff was prepared at that time to go out and inspect in an accelerated and aggressive manner the activities leading up to San Onofre resuming fuel transfer operations, as well as their initiation. And I don't want to get into great detail here because Greg is going to walk you through that. So what we want to share with you tonight are what we've observed to date. Our inspections are still ongoing, and we'll tell you a little bit about what we plan for future inspection activities so that you can understand what we're observing, the frequency of our observations, and how we plan to communicate to you, members of the public. So I'm going to turn this over to Scott. He has a few opening remarks, and then we'll proceed with letting Greg tell the story.
All right, and I'm not going to go long because I really want to get as many the opportunities to the public to raise questions and ask us about certain things. So I just want to say welcome, thank you for coming. We are public servants, the NRC. We are your public servants. You all deserve a strong, independent, credible nuclear regulator. You deserve that. We believe that in our heart of hearts, and we strive every day to fill that role as a strong, independent, credible regulator. How do we do that? We do it by adhering to our principles of good regulation, which we hold dear and we talk about all the time, and it guides our day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month decisions. We have to be independent, meaning we can't be unduly influenced by external forces or individuals or companies. We have to be clear. We can't be tech speak, which is easy for us to do because we're all scientists and engineers. We have to be clear in our communications so that you can understand what it is that we're saying and why we're saying what we're saying. We have to be open. And how do we do that? We hold over 1,000 public meetings every year in the United States, this being one of them. And so we welcome these opportunities to engage you all in a dialogue. So we have to be independent, clear, open. We have to be reliable, or in other words, consistent. When presented with the same fact pattern at one facility and another, we should yield the same independent regulatory result. So we have to be consistent and reliable. And finally, we have to be efficient. We have to use the resources that were allocated in a manner that is most efficient and effective to achieve our mission, which is to protect the public health and safety from the civilian use of nuclear and radioactive material and to protect the environment. That is our mission. So, I'm not going to say much more, but I want to say that I really appreciate this opportunity, and I want to hear from you. We all do. We really look forward to this opportunity to engage you in a dialogue. If I could do this in a living room setting where we're all sitting around on couches and having an adult beverage, that would be great. We can't do that. This is the best we can come up with. But if you don't like it, give us feedback. Chip mentioned the feedback form. We're all about feedback. We get better with feedback. So again, welcome. Look forward to your questions. And I'm going to hand it off to Greg, and he's going to talk about what we've been doing at the site for the last couple of months.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Linda. And good evening again. Just to reiterate, I'm the Chief of Reactor Inspection Branch, and my inspectors are the ones that have been out there for the last couple of months watching a lot of activities. I'm going to kind of give you a highlight of what we've seen. But just to review, to take us to where we are up to the decision for resumption of fuel transfer operations. I'm just going to review a little bit. The NRC has performed many regulatory oversight activities since the August 2018 Canister misalignment event. The preliminary results of our reactive special inspection to review the event were communicated in a public webinar on November 8, 2018. The final results of our special inspection, which included a discussion of the licensee's causal evaluations and corrective actions to prevent recurrence of the misalignment event, were communicated in a public webinar on March 25, 2019. In our last public webinar, held on June 3, 2018, the NRC communicated our conclusion, and that was based on a collection of oversight activities that we performed. That Southern California Edison Company had completed all corrective actions necessary to resume fuel transfer operations at SONGS in a safe and compliant manner. The NRC has communicated in these past webinars and in the NRC inspection reports issued since that time that adequate measures were taken to ensure that the root and contributing causes of the misalignment event were determined. The causes involved the San Onofre management's failure to provide adequate procedures, adequate training to support the procedures, and adequate oversight. The NRC also determined the following corrective action subject areas that included many detailed actions. would be adequate to ensure the safe resumption of fuel transfer operations. These areas included training requirements, procedure enhancements, equipment enhancements, and oversight improvements. Since the NRC decision on the resumption of fuel loading activities at SONGS, the NRC's focus has been on the verification of those corrective actions to ensure that they were developed and implemented correctly, and that the actions were effective in ensuring safe fuel handling operations. Starting at the beginning of July, the NRC has performed 5 unannounced inspections by 4 different inspectors. These were to review and observe essentially all licensee activities. These activities involved training of personnel on procedure changes and dry run demonstrations conducted by Holtec. Holtec is a contractor of Southern California Edison, and that was done before the handling of any fuel. We also had inspectors out there to watch other preparatory activities performed by the licensee, and that was to ensure that all corrective actions were in place before resuming fuel transfer operations. We had inspectors on site during the week of July 15th to observe all critical activities associated with the movement of Canister 30 from the Unit 2 spent fuel building to its downloaded storage location on the pad. We also had inspectors on site from July 22nd through July 30th, present both day and night, to observe all critical activities associated with fuel loading of Canister 31 and the movement of the canister from the fuel building to the downloaded storage location in the pad. The inspections performed by the NRC were done in an unannounced basis and at varying times to ensure that our presence was not totally predictable. Overall, the NRC concluded that the corrective actions taken by the licensee were effectively implemented and that all activities performed by Holtec and SCE personnel were done in a safe manner. Plant personnel were adequately trained, they were deliberate and methodical in their actions to ensure adherence to procedures, and they repeatedly exhibited conservative decision-making behaviors. The equipment performed as expected, and the threshold for entering items into the corrective action program was sufficiently low. The inspectors did, however, observe some issues, where Holtec and SCE personnel appropriately worked through their process to resolve. And I'll discuss those issues as I talk through the oversight activities that we've performed over the past couple of months. Here's a picture of the Unit 2 spent fuel pool during fuel loading activities. The inspectors observed that SONG-specific fuel training programs and training procedures resulted in improvements, such that all fuel handling was performed safely and in accordance with procedures that had been enhanced to include critical steps and specific criteria. This picture shows a fuel bundle being loaded into Canister 30. The inspectors noted evidence of the revised training program for SONG's oversight specialists and corrective action program training throughout all activities observed. Furthermore, contractor oversight and dedicated additional SONG's oversight personnel for contractors were also noted during all stages of fuel transfer operations. Procedures used during the activities clearly defined personnel roles, responsibilities, and qualifications. Here you can see a loaded canister inside the transfer cask just after it was withdrawn from the cask loading pit of the spent fuel pool. The transfer cask is wiped clean when it is in this position. Cleaning cloths attached to the end of an extension pole are used. The inspectors were present for this issue that happened, and that was that during the cleaning process, we observed that a cloth that was used for that cleaning process was inadvertently dropped into the spent fuel pool. The cleaning cloths used for this cleaning activities are designed to float, just in case they got dropped. So this one did float, and we observed Holtec personnel stop everything they were doing and follow their procedure promptly to retrieve the cloth without issue. This slide shows the cask washdown area inside the fuel building. Canister 30, if you'll recall, was stored in the Unit 3 cache washdown area for a little more than 11 months, until it was moved from the fuel building to the storage pad during the week of July 15th. In the picture, you can observe that the canister is seismically restrained by lower and upper slings and brackets that connect the transfer cask to the cask washdown area. While canister 30 was stored in this location, it was monitored for radiation and temperature. The inspectors noted overall improvements to the corrective action program. The inspectors did, however, observe one weakness associated with the action to ensure Holtec worked directly under the Southern California Edison Corrective Action Program. This involved the failure to enter an issue into the Edison Corrective Action Program. Specifically, some staining was observed on the exterior surface of canister 31. Holtec personnel followed approved procedures to clean the discoloration and sample the area after the cleaning to ensure there was no chemical residue left on the canister. An Edison engineer recognized that although the approved procedures were used to clean the canister, Holtec in fact failed to enter the issue into the Edison Corrective Action Program as required. The engineer promptly coached Holtec workers to ensure that Edison Corrective Action Program is used for these type of field activities. Here you can see the high port moving the canister from the storage pad, from the fuel building to the storage pad area, where the handoff to the vertical cask transporter occurs. Evidence of several corrective actions can be seen here, such as the presence of personnel wearing colored vests to designate their different roles, there to ensure safe transport. You can also see the transport pathway markers on the roadway to ensure appropriate clearance is needed to maintain seismic qualification during cask transport from the fuel building to the storage pad. The inspectors observed effective implementation of corrective actions associated with personnel enhancements. In the August misalignment event, there were only 2 people on the storage pad during the downloading operation. Today, as you can see, as activities happened over the last month, there are numerous personnel on the storage pad now, with all with specific roles and responsibilities. During the downloading activities, a worker was observed walking underneath a portion of the loaded transporter, prompting Holtec to take a safety timeout. This was an industrial safety near miss. It was recognized by oversight personnel, and everything was appropriately stopped at that time, again, to take a timeout. As a result, a shield plate that you can see in this picture in the withdrawn position, it remained in the closed position for approximately 4.5 hours. Airflow is sealed off from the vault when the shield plate is fully closed. Workers restored some airflow to the vault during this timeout period after a couple of hours by partially opening the shield plate drawer. This was based on their experience at other storage sites where that was allowed to open it up and enable some level of airflow for cooling of the fuel. When the timeout ended, workers fully removed the plate and restored all ventilation to the vault. Later, it was recognized, again by Edison personnel, that the Edison procedure required the drawer to be full open after 4 hours. So this concept of partially opening the drawer, which did allow some airflow, didn't satisfy the procedure requirement. However, in our review and licensee's review, that procedure was overly conservative by putting in place the 4-hour requirement. In fact, the drawer could remain in the closed position for up to 9 hours with no effect to the temperature of the canister. So with that lesson learned, they appropriately improved their procedures to clarify what the drawer positions need to be and how long they can be in that way. A major improvement to the transporter crane was to add additional equipment to monitoring the load, and you can see that by the 2 locations here with the arrows. This equipment would alarm in the event a canister was misaligned or hung up before it reached the bottom of the vault. There was an observation that we had during the dry run demonstration activities. Again, those were the training exercises done before the handling of any fuel. And what happened was some workers were questioning whether or not that the equipment enhancements, this monitoring tablets to see the condition of the load, whether or not they were required to be present during the withdrawal of the canister. The licensee does need to then demonstrate the ability to both insert the canister and withdraw the canister. As a result of the questions, plant personnel appropriately stopped, made sure they understood the situation, and in fact they did learn that it was required to have the monitors in place both during inserting and withdrawing of the canister. They appropriately improved their procedures. The training evolution revealed something they needed to train a little bit more on, such that when we observed the actual downloading of canisters with fuel, all requirements were well understood and all procedures were followed appropriately. Lastly, I'll provide the latest update of ongoing activities at SOMS. Within the past couple of weeks, I think I skipped the slide, apologize. So this picture illustrates workers closely monitoring the load indication while ensuring that glare did not impact their ability to clearly see the monitoring screens during daytime operations. This was something that the inspector saw, but Edison, they were able to appropriately work through it so they could adequately monitor the status at all times. Here you can see the display console on the vertical cast transporter and the operator's level of attention during the activity. The inspectors observed this level of engagement by SCE and Holtec personnel throughout all stages of fuel transfer operations. So, in summary, the NRC concluded that our recent inspection activities, that the corrective actions taken by the licensee were in fact effectively implemented, and that all activities performed by Holtec and SCE personnel were done in a safe and compliant manner. Lastly, I'll provide the update on ongoing activities at SOMS. Within the past couple of weeks, while preparing additional new canisters for fuel loading, Southern California Edison identified that several of the empty canisters stored in the open laydown area had experienced water intrusion during the preceding 11 months of storage. As seen here, they were wrapped in tarps during the storage period. SCE assigned a team of technical personnel to develop a plan for inspection, flushing, and sampling of the canisters before they were staged for fuel building and transferred to the storage system. These activities were initiated last week, and NRC inspectors were on site reviewing the plans for and performance of inspections and cleaning activities. Inspectors will continue to observe these activities during on-site inspections in the coming weeks. So that's the story of our inspections, what we've seen to date, and with that I'll turn it over to Linda.
Thanks, Greg. Okay, there, we'll start again. So I want to emphasize, there's a reason we selected these photographs to show you the story that Greg has just told. The issues that have been identified thus far in the loading campaign do not have safety significance. They are not risk significance issues. We elected to talk with you about them this evening because they demonstrate our observation of the types of behaviors that we have an expectation for at a nuclear facility. And that is that people have questioning attitudes, they're conducting their assigned tasks in accordance with procedures. When they have questions, they pull the procedures out, see if further clarification is needed, that there's been additional management oversight provided for the contractor workers to ensure that we've got some independent eyes, or that Southern California Edison has some independent eyes. We're not directly involved with the task, but that can stand back and take a more objective look at what's going on. So that's why we've chosen these photographs. Again, I want to emphasize that the issues that we've selected are not significant. In fact, in other instances, we might not even write about them in an inspection report. We're talking about them with you tonight because they are an opportunity for us to share with you our observations of behaviors that we would expect at a nuclear facility. Now, one of the things that we didn't completely get into, we've talked about, and Scott and I have both personally mentioned, what our plans are for inspections in the future. We intend to continue an accelerated or heightened level of oversight on the order of at least a week a month or more, depending on what activities are going on. And I will tell you that the canister cleaning efforts are going to prompt additional inspections because we want to not only be reading the plans and the procedures, but we will actually have inspectors on site monitoring or directly observing those activities. We still have a few questions in Southern California. Edison is still in the throes of a root cause assessment, but we will be looking very clearly to ensure that prior to staging any of the canisters that you saw a photograph of, that they have definitely proven that they meet code standards. So right now, they're in the process of implementing the cleansing plan. They've not moved any of those canisters that have had any water infiltration in over to be loaded at the spent fuel building. And we'll have inspectors on site. We have inspectors on site this week. Greg and Chris will be joining them, and we'll have inspectors on site again next week. So we want to just assure you that we've got a heightened level of oversight. Now, how do we communicate what we're looking at? Our game plan is still the same as what I explained to you in early June. We'll be out there frequently. We plan to hold inspection intervals at roughly a quarterly, calendar quarter length, and we'll be publishing public inspection reports at the end of that calendar quarter. So this particular inspection cycle that is currently ongoing will end in late September. We should have an inspection report published in mid-October. We're going to try and get it out there and on our public website as early as possible. We continue to support the Spotlight portion of the NRC public webpage, so that means for those of you who haven't heard about it, you can go to www.nrc.gov. On the left-hand side of that first pane of the webpage, there's something called Spotlight, and songs, fuel loading issues, I think, is #1 at the top of the list. So all documents, all inspection reports are posted there. We will continue to do that. We're adding additional information in there so that when we're referencing new reg documents or our guidance documents, we're beginning to add those to the webpage to make it easier for all of you to try and find that reference material, and we'll continue to do that. Yes, tonight's presentation will be on the website, and that should occur tomorrow. Is that correct? Okay, so it should be up there and available tomorrow. I noticed that we have, I just want to offer an option because I know Chip was a little concerned about, we have a number of people who are videotaping tonight's meeting. The agency can't speak for how those videos will be posted, but you may be able to ask questions about that during the community engagement panel meeting that's scheduled for later this week. Do you have any closing remarks that you wanted to offer, Scott?
Only that I'm looking forward to the comments, and I think we have our honored guest here tonight to start us off, right?
Okay, we're going to go to the question and comment period, and as I said earlier, it's 3 minutes, and we're going to get started. We have 49 speakers, okay, and it's notable that we have Representative Levin with us here tonight, and he's going to start us off. And it's notable that all of you are here tonight, but it's great that Representative Levin is here, and I have to apologize to you for making you the guinea pig on the timer. Okay.
My best.
Okay.
Over there.
Yes, and are you comfortable there?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
All right, I'll do my best to stay to 3 minutes. Well, I want to first thank you for having this meeting here in San Juan Capistrano as opposed to in Texas or somewhere else. So I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful to the members of our task force, our San Onofre task force. Could you raise your hands if you're part of our task force? So thank you for your service. One of the first things that I did is try to set up a task force. So for those who saw the hands raised, if you want to make comments or questions, if you have things that you want to relay to me or to our office, please see one of them because we meet routinely. Most of you know that I've had serious concerns about this site. As the congressman representing the families here, including a young family of my own, it's one of my top priorities is to get the spent nuclear fuel off of our beach once and for all. I may rush through my 3 minutes, so bear with me, and I apologize, Scott. I promise I won't go too long.
No worries.
So, while we work towards that goal, we've got to also ensure that there's adequate oversight of operations at San Onofre and that safety risks to thousands of families in the region are minimized. The NRC's mission statement clearly affirms that the Commission has a responsibility to provide adequate protection of public health and safety. And I've heard that word, adequate, used a number of times tonight. A look back at recent incidents at SONGS shows me, and I think shows many of us here, a record that demands greater NRC intervention. I'm concerned that the NRC has allowed Southern California Edison to restart spent nuclear fuel loading without committing an NRC inspector to the facility at all times that fuel transfer activities take place. Southern California Edison's safety record includes incidents as recently as this year, and I believe there's a need for continuous oversight at the facility. And look, this isn't meant to pick on Southern California Edison, but what I told the CEO of Southern California Edison, I don't represent his interests, I represent the community's interests. I've understood with you, my friends at the NRC, in our many conversations, that this is not, I think we all know, your typical site because of the population density, because of the seismic hazard, because of the history of issues that we've seen. This isn't your typical site, and therefore you shouldn't have your typical protocol. Restoring public trust demands that you take actions that are not merely adequate, but that are exceptional. As I told Chair Savinky when we met recently, it's imperative that the NRC, Southern California Edison, and Holtec International take concrete actions to improve public confidence in operations at the facility. I strongly encourage Chairman Savinky to implement an NRC inspector during transfers of spent nuclear fuel, and I continue to believe that is necessary. I also believe that every canister that has been loaded must be inspected, not just the 8 that have been inspected so far. I've heard about a 95% confidence interval. That's the rationale. There's a 95% confidence interval. I can tell you in my discussions with our community, and even with the Commanding General at Marine Corps Base Camp Pendleton, a 95% confidence interval is not good enough. We need to inspect every canister. I'm also concerned about the lifespan of these canisters, particularly if the time that they end up being stored on the coast is longer than we expect. And I'm all too familiar with the effort in our country to deal with spent nuclear fuel. I'd like to be able to tell you, my constituents, that the NRC is genuinely committed to protecting your safety. Each incident at SONGS was thought to be the last. Every time that we were told this will never happen again, it's happened again. Let's not have history repeat itself. Regulators, including all of you, should be doing everything you can to ensure that history does not repeat itself. I want to close by saying this. I was glad that the House of Representatives included my request for $25 million in appropriations legislation for a consolidated interim storage program at the Department of Energy to remove spent nuclear fuel from nuclear power plants all across the country, including at San Onofre, And I'm also glad we were able to introduce the Spent Fuel Prioritization Act. That was informed by many of the folks in this room. This is a bill that prioritizes the movement of spent nuclear fuel from sites such as San Onofre with higher seismic risk and greater population density. Last week, this bill got a boost from the California State Legislature when a bipartisan group of state senators, including Pat Bates, who represents this area, came together and submitted a joint resolution in support. I'm grateful to see this strong showing of local bipartisan support for this bill. It's a reminder that not every issue is a partisan issue, and that we have priorities as a community that we can all agree on. I can tell you that core to my service in the House of Representatives has been trying to get this waste off our coast as quickly and as safely as possible. And every single day that I'm honored to serve this community, you have my word, it will continue to be a top priority. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Representative Levin. And I think it's the magic of being a federally elected congressperson that he used no time. So at any rate, thank you, Representative Levin. And we're going to go on with John Taylor, who's a councilman from the city of San Juan Capistrano. John.
Yes.
Okay.
Good evening.
We're going to make you the guinea pig.
Okay, make me the guinea pig.
Okay.
I won't be as
Go ahead.
long as our congressman. He's very eloquent. Thank you all for being here from our community. My name is John Taylor. I'm a city councilman from San Juan Capistrano. I'm also a member of the community engagement panel. I want to thank the NRC for being here as well. It's very important. Number one for me, as part of the community engagement panel, was making sure the number one priority we're all here is our public safety and making sure that things are done right. On that day in August when the fuel container got jammed up, nothing was damaged except the public trust. And that's been the most important thing that we have to look at. I wanted to see all this myself, so since all of this has been going on, I went out, I contacted Southern California Edison, and I asked them if I could come out and watch the operation, a fuel canister being loaded. We started about 9 o'clock in the evening. I stood up on a hill with a representative of the Southern California Edison, and with binoculars we could see all the operation going on. There were 20 members of 20 staff members gathered around. I guess the NRC was there. I think it might have been fuel container 31 that I got to witness. It was during the night. So it's a very massive project. This machine going up this ramp. There's people all over the place. There was a guy swabbing with RP on his back of his vest, saying, he's radiation protection. He's checking to make sure nothing is radioactive. There was staff all over the place. It's a very slow, methodical process. I witnessed nothing but everybody just doing what they're supposed to do. So I felt very confident in the way things are being done and being loaded. And that's what I wanted to share tonight. That I feel like the most important thing for us right now is to get that fuel safely stored in the SJC. But more than that, I would ask all of us to really focus on getting it off the beach and getting Congress to act. That's our most important thing. I don't want to get hung up on the small details. Like I said, the trust of the public was very badly damaged. I think for that reason, the NRC needs to be there during the fuel offloading at all times. I think because of that public distrust that's happened. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is. And since you're our public servants, that's what we would ask of you. Thank you very much for your time.
John, thank you very, very much. And I just want to note that was a very, very good example of you can say a lot of good things in 3 minutes. So thank you for that.
Chip, so this is supposed to be more interactive, so I don't know that there was a question in there, but I just wanted to make a comment. And that is, I'm sorry, I guess I should stand up, but just for brevity, I just want to make a point that the bit about, this is, and the congressman made this point very eloquently, this notion that there should be a full-time inspector. That's something that we have very, very, very strongly considered. The congressman made reference to a meeting that he had with the chairman of the NRC. I don't know, I can't recall exactly. It was about a month or so ago. And they met in the congressman's office and discussed that very issue. So it's something that we have really taken on board very, very seriously. We think we're in the right place in spite of the calls, and reasonable people can disagree, and I understand that. But your point, I understand your point. I've heard it before, and I'm sure we'll hear it again. We're leaning as far forward as we think we possibly can in spending our resources out here to ensure that this facility is operated. That activities, licensed activities are done safely here. But I respect the point. I just want you to know that it's something that we have indeed considered at the highest levels of the agency.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Scott. Sherry Horn from the City of Laguna Woods and Donald Masters, City of Delmar. And then we're going to go to Doug Bowder and Dan Stetson.
Thank you. Sherry Horn, City of Laguna Woods. I'm a council member, and I thank you for being here and listening to our concerns, and I thank Representative Levitt for wanting to get it off the beach. I'm concerned that as long as it's here on the beach, I would like to see it stored safely. And I think that there's a lot to be said for thick canisters. The thin canisters, 5 and 8 inch thick, leak gamma radiation. They have no radiation monitors on them, and they only are rated for like 40 years. The thick canisters are 10 to 20 inch thick ductile iron that survived Fukushima. I see you smiling. But they survived an earthquake and tsunami. They have radiation monitors on them. They open and close so that if it's damaged, like scraping the sides of the containment, the cement containment, it can be removed and put in a different container. There's no hot box there right now, and you're planning on getting rid of the fuel pool. So if those canisters do develop a crack, what are you going to do? So I would like to see radiation monitors, thick canisters, and to have it stored here safely. It's all well and good to say to get it out of here as soon as possible, but you've never come up with a storage site. We've been trying for years to find an interim storage site. So I don't see that as real soon. But a thick canister, you could transport in a thick canister. You can't transport it in that. Plus climate change. There's a lot of sea level rise. This is 100 feet from the ocean, 12 inches above the water table. Greenland is melting. We can't wait. Every 40 years, you're going to have to be transferring out these canisters into another one. The thick ones last 100 years. It would cost you less doing it that way, and it would be safer for us. So thank you for being here. I appreciate it, but we would like to see more done with the canisters. The cement is going to start deteriorating in 10 years. Well, how are you going to replace the cement overpack every 10 years? It just does not seem like a good system and a safe thing for our communities. Thank you.
So Chip is the senior.
Masters is coming up to address this.
Chip, so please come on up, sir. I just want to comment. I'm not going to do this on every single one of these. I promise. But I did want this to be a dialogue. I don't want, my goal for the meeting was that we could actually have a conversation as opposed to just 49 or however many individual monologues. Because while I respect everybody's opinion and everybody deserves to be heard and listened to, I just worry that you're going to walk away from here unsatisfied that you never got to hear us respond or comment but I'm going to leave that up to Chip as our professional facilitator. We'll jump in. mean, a lot of the things.
I'm tired of being lied to.
Sorry.
I'm tired of being lied to.
Why
You
don't you-
don't want us to talk
Why
until
don't you let us
5.
ask you questions? Like
sorry?
myself. Why don't you just let us ask you questions?
Well,
You're going to be,
Go ahead.
You're going to be called, okay? I have all of your names, and then you can get up and you can
You
answer
say you get
questions.
3 minutes here, he gets to talk doubly over everybody.
Well, the
You want questions,
NRC is
let him
trying
ask.
to be responsive,
You're not being,
okay?
you're not a facilitator.
Okay.
You're one-sided.
Okay, we're
You need to
going
go.
to go ahead.
You commented that
My name
someone
is,
speaks.
This is,
Don Mosier,
oh, I'm sorry.
and I'm in the city of Del Mar. I'm also Mike Levin's
The mic.
task force.
Move the mic.
Don Mosier, City of Del Mar. I'm also Mike Levin's task force, former mayor. And I have a very specific question that I'd like the NRC to answer. There was concern about gouging of the cast during insertion past the guide rings. There was video inspection of 8 canisters out of the 29 that had been loaded. There was a statistical determination that there was 95% certainty that there were no deep gouges on the 21 casts that weren't inspected. I'm a retired scientist. I know statistics quite well. I can't imagine any statistical test that would give you that level of certainty. So I would like to know how it was determined that inspection of 8 canisters was sufficient to reach the conclusion that none of the 29 canisters had significant gouging.
So, we have inspectors out there during the inspection, video recording, and the capturing of the flawed data to evaluate depth and collect the data that was used in the statistical analysis. We do these types of things on a sampling basis. We did do our inspection review to confirm that the sampling was the appropriate size, and using distributions, we're able to conclude that 8 canisters gave us a representative indication of what we would see through the population of canisters that had been downloaded. When we went back and forth over months with Edison to ensure that they were appropriately characterizing the flaws, we had a lot of engagement with them. And we asked them to make sure that as they evaluated these flaws, to not just use what they saw, but to ensure that any flaw that could be there in the manufacturing process was overlaid with a flaw that could happen during the downloading process. And then also, if it were to be withdrawn in the future, that any additional scratching would exactly line up on top of those other 2 that were there, so that we could get the worst case situation in our evaluation. We had the confidence level with the sample performed, that we had a good understanding of what was happening, and then the strategy used to confirm that we had the worst case flaw that could be out there, even though it wasn't seen through the evaluations. This is what could happen with a high confidence level within that 95 confidence level. We have our own professional statistical analysis, use that data. We didn't just rely on Southern California Edison's information they gave us. We did our own evaluation of it using a variety of methods to confirm that the worst case flaw would be bounded by the code requirements, and that's that it wouldn't be any deeper than 10% of the wall thickness. Now, we're not just satisfied with that. We're confident that it's safe right now where they are, but we are expecting Edison, as they develop an aging management plan going forward, to be doing continuing inspections to look for any indications that's there, to include looking at all canisters that are out there, to ensure that anything that's going on with these canisters won't exceed code allowances, and if they do, they'll communicate with the NRC and will oversee the process such that they can correct it to ensure the safety of these canisters throughout their lifetime.
You didn't answer the question. Okay, answer his question. Because
Do you have
filibuster.
a quick follow-up?
A very quick
Just put on the
follow-up,
record.
yeah, so 95% confidence.
Require him to
interval
answer the question,
includes
mediator.
what leaves a 5% chance that the conclusion is wrong. So you've got 30 canisters, you look at 8, there's a 5% chance you're wrong. That's a very high risk level for the residents of Southern California.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for the question. Thank you for the question. It's a good question. It's one we've heard before. If you haven't
And you
heard-
won't give
if you
the
haven't-
information. We've asked for the information, the 95%, and you
Make
won't
him
provide
answer
it to the
question.
public.
Hey,
You're violating the rules.
listen, we're not
No,
gonna
he
get through,
didn't-
hey, we're not gonna get through this if you keep
You're
shouting
not a
out.
facilitator.
I don't care
You're
what-
one-sided.
I don't care what
You're
you
one-sided.
think.
You're
Come
not
on,
making
guys.
him answer the
Okay,
Let's have a
I don't wanna hear
conversation.
any more outbursts.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Answer the
Dictator, tyranny.
Okay, so
Answer the goddamn
the question is, why are we okay with the 95%
You need to go.
status or statistical amount of confidence interval? This very short answer, and I understand now that everybody's going to agree with this. We rely on standard engineering practice, right? We rely, hold on now.
No.
Guys, let me answer the question.
You're not
okay?
answering the question.
Shouting over me isn't going to help.
But giving bullshit answers isn't going to help.
I'm not giving you
You
a
are.
BS
That's not an
answer.
answer.
Let me, you haven't even let me
Oh,
answer.
I'm listening.
You have not let me answer.
I'm listening very carefully. Go ahead.
Please, there are a lot of other people here.
Yeah, you know,
who don't
you-
need the theatrics. I'm
It's
trying
not
to answer your
theatrics,
question and you're
It's
interrupting.
They all want to hear.
Okay, I'll tell you what we're gonna do. We're gonna take a 10-minute recess, and I'm gonna ask our security guy, to talk to this guy, to keep him,
Because
to
you
keep
don't want
him,
the content
to
of
keep
it.
him.
You don't want the content of his speech, and you're single.
Okay.
Does everyone agree?
10 minutes. 10 minutes.
Throw Chip
I'm
out.
going to answer the question,
Throw
but
Chip
only if
out.
I'm given the opportunity.
Okay, let him answer the question.
Okay? The question is, as I understand it, and just don't give me a nod of the head that this is the question, that the data that we collected and the statistical analysis that was performed, why is that 95% confidence? Why are we satisfied with that? That's essentially the question, right? And I'm sorry. Yeah, so the answer to the question, and I'll preface it by saying that, well, I'll just answer the question. The answer to the question is, and I'm no statistician, but I have PhD statisticians that work for me. And they are using the data that was collected, that we independently observed, put it into the statistical models that are governed by well-known, understood algorithms and standards that are used throughout the industrial, that are used all the time. I mean, everything in life there's some associated risk with it, right? Flying an airplane, there's a risk. Driving your car is a risk. There's always a risk. But in engineering, hold on now, in engineering space, you can't ever design a perfect system. You have to use real data and real models and real statistical models evaluated by real professionals to make judgments. And that's exactly what we did. We made a judgment based on established
Will you release that
models.
information? Will you release that
It's in our
information?
inspection report. The actual data that you're looking for, the actual spreadsheets.
Yes.
I mean,
Will you release that
if you
data?
want to see the spreadsheets
Yes.
with the
Yes.
Okay, we're gonna go on.
No, let him answer
We're
the
gonna go
damn
on.
question.
You tried to answer the question.
I don't see why we wouldn't, but
Cover-up.
Okay,
it's not a cover-up. It's just-
No, you're not, he is. Will you release the data? That's all we're asking. Will you release that data?
I mean, I do.
Doug Powder.
Well, some of the data is proprietary, but I mean, we must have.
proprietary.
Hold on now, guys, look.
You gotta get off this.
I am going to get off this, but I think this is an important point, okay? This is an important point, and I'm going to ask folks to follow the protocols that we laid out, okay? But the point is, and now I lost it because I...
Will you release the data?
100% inspection.
Oh, the proprietary piece.
Right.
We, as the federal entity responsible for the safe operation of these facilities, we have access to anything that we need to do our safety mission. Anything, including proprietary information, which we look at all of the time. We intentionally do not take possession of proprietary information unless it is submitted to us as part of a licensing aspect. I'm not a liar, Jeff.
100%
Come on, you're not
inspection
even letting me
is
finish.
called
We look at proprietary information all of the time. We don't take possession of it because,
Side
No one
side
shared.
issue, you're on.
no, it's not because we don't want to share it, it's because it's proprietary information.
Nothing
We are
proprietary
we
about-
are the independent assessors of that information
we've- I
and
think
make
we've-
independent judgments
I think
on
we're
the
done with
public's
this,
behalf.
okay?
That's what we
We're
do.
going to go
What do you mean by
to,
proprietary that belongs to Southern Cal? Let us know.
okay, Doug Powder, you can talk to him after the meeting. Doug Powder.
Get sued by
Go ahead.
He can wait till the end.
And then Dan Stetson.
He's not asking questions, he should wait till the end.
Thank
you. I'll really work on staying inside 3 minutes here. First, thanks for the opportunity to be here tonight and to make a few comments at this meeting. I appreciate it on behalf of Southern California Edison, really to talk here about both what's ongoing with fuel transfer and ultimately the dismantling of the plant, which we hope to begin in the near future. I want to thank Representative Levin, didn't get a chance to talk with him, but for attending tonight and for his deep interest in ensuring that our spent fuel is safely stored, which he talked about, and then eventually transferred to the site. We share that common interest. We share his support in that regard for a long-term off-site storage facility, just like you all do. And in fact, we think that's critical to our overall plan for ultimate decommissioning of the station. I'd like to thank Councilmember John Taylor for his late night visit to the station to watch the downloading operations of Canister 31. He was there and watched pretty much of the evolution on the ISFSI pad, and he's also a community engagement panel member. As he saw firsthand, the dry storage pad activities move slowly and methodically. That's just the way we like for them to move. I also want to acknowledge members of the public who are here to learn more about fuel transfer operations at the station. We hope you will be able to also attend our community engagement panel meeting, which is this week on Thursday evening. Simply stated, a lot has changed for us since the incident on August the 3rd of last year. We've talked about the many improvements we've made to our fuel transfer operations at that time, and we stressed several key areas: training, procedures, technology, and I guess most importantly, oversight. This is something that Greg Warnick talked about as well with regard to the NRC observations. We made changes and improvements. We tested them internally. We then demonstrated them to the NRC doing multiple dry run tests, which were also mentioned. The NRC told us it was safe to resume fuel transfer. That was on May 21st, but we didn't officially start until July 15th. We used time to continue to assess our improvements, and assess proper staffing to support the activities, to do additional dry runs, and frankly, just to make sure when it came time to do the work, it was done right, it was done safely. And that was really our top priority, and that remains our top priority. That's not to say everything went 100% perfect. As you heard from the NRC, from Greg Warnick earlier, there are gaps to improvement. We've identified those gaps, and you've heard Greg mention the use of the corrective action program. We continue to stress that as we move forward. And I will say that canisters 30 and 31 were safely downloaded into the dry gas storage facility. It's a great result, but how we got there is equally important. We saw both operators and SE oversight demonstrate a low threshold for entry into the corrective action program, which led to procedure and work improvements. We identified ongoing risks. We've implemented mitigations.
And Doug, I'm going to have to ask you to finish up.
I will, Jeff, thank you. So, I want to say that we took a time out to assess our work. We're doing some additional improvements in the fuel transfer operations, and I look forward to further discussions this week at the community engagement panel. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight and to continue this dialogue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. And we're going to go to Dan Stetson, and then we're going to go to Alice McNally, Kevin Blanche, Gene Stone, Donna Gilmore, and Ray Lux.
Hello. Thank you for this meeting and the opportunity to learn from you and the opportunity to express our concerns. My name is Daniel Stetson. I'm the former president of the Ocean Institute, where I worked for 23 years. I have volunteered on the community engagement panel since its inception in 2014 and currently serve as vice chair. I also serve on Congress 11's federal task force. I've toured the San Onofre nuclear generating station 10 times. In fact, I think I could give the tour. I've also toured and inspected the Holtex canister manufacturing facility in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and will tour the Holtec plant in Camden, New Jersey later next month. Like many others, I look forward to the continued safe transfer of the spent fuel from the cooling pools to the SJC. This is critically important for 3 important reasons. Number 1, the SJC is currently the safest place available for the storage of the spent nuclear fuel. Number 2, this is a key step for the removal of the domes and the remediation of the site. Number 3, it prepares the canisters for safe transportation out of San Onofre, which is very important, and opens up many potential options for their removal. Collectively, we really must keep our eye on the ball and focus on the facts and what matters to us for the long term and what is responsible. We really must continue to mobilize Congress in favor of changing federal law. If we do not, we have to understand that the spent nuclear fuel will be with us for many future generations. I'm sure I speak for the entire community in appreciation for the safety protocols, new safety protocols for the transfer and storage of spent nuclear fuel. We all appreciate the additional trainings, increase in staffing, and equipment upgrades such as the camera and loading monitoring equipment. SEC, Holtec, and the NRC need to learn from what happened at SONGS to restore the community's trust. We all want to trust, but we depend upon the NRC to verify. So I ask you this question: how can we make sure that the vendors of this equipment and these services learn and adopt the best practices throughout the industry so that all of us are safer because we're working with the same technologies and the best practices?
You speak only for yourself, not the community.
Is that the end of yours?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. And we also recently, myself and all the senior leaders from all 4 regions and headquarters recently went to visit Holtec, who's going to have a day in Camden at their facility, and we impressed upon them these very same issues.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Is Alice, are you here? This is Alice McNally, and then we're going to go to Kevin Blanche.
Alice McNally, Del Mar, California. The public and the ratepayers deserve to know the truth. No more secrecy. Here we are tonight being told that everything is hunky-dory. It is not, and you know it. San Onofre has the worst safety record in the industry, always putting the shareholders and profit before safety. The location couldn't be worse, and you know it. The canisters are inaccurate, inadequate, too thin, and subject to corrosion and cracking. They do not meet the DOE and the ASME nuclear safety standards, and they have a limited lifespan of 15 years. This waste will be active for 250,000 years. Evacuation of 8.4 million people is impossible, and you know it. We, the ratepayers, have paid $4 billion with a B into the decommissioning fund. This is our money. There is plenty to pay for the thick-walled canisters which survived Fukushima, for full-time site inspections, to build hot cells, to cool the waste before closing the cooling pools, to train and hire only certified employees. This can be done right. Would our safety be more secure if this becomes a ballot issue? Listen to us. No exemptions, no waivers, no cutting corners and regulations. Spare no expense. We demand the truth, and we demand that you hold yourselves and the Coastal Commission and Edison to the highest standards. Our lives depend on it.
Great job. Thank you. Thank you very much, Alice. And Kevin, do you want to come up and talk to us? And we'll get Peter on a little bit later, but this is Kevin Blanche. And then we're going to go to Gene Stone, and then Donna Gilmore, and over to Ray Lutz, and then Jackson Eagle.
So as many of you know in this room, I've been at this a long time. 50 years fighting this beast, the poster child for everything wrong with the nuclear industry, San Onofre. My father, the Pendleton Marine, put in a cage and nuked to death. Died in the prime of his life right here. I've been fighting AML leukemia, getting 2 months to live 7 years, and this has been my passion, my fight. And I want to say this to the NRC. I used to call you guys the nuclear rallying cheerleaders, as you know, and I go off on you more than anybody. But this delays on this process is not our friend. This, I cannot overstate this. This spent fuel has been in those spent fuel pools for 50 years. Where were you all then? So here's the deal. Out of those spent fuel pools into these canisters is an incredibly complicated, vulnerable, tough task. And I am a staff professor, and I do have a PhD in this. Know this. As workers at San Onofre, I cannot say how much I care about you and how much I love you and how proud I am of all you workers at San Onofre who are doing this incredible task. This place is hot, and I can tell you how it's hot. I'm the one that leaked this stuff on the cheating of the exchange. I was in a bone marrow transplant center fighting for my life. They had an accident, so-called, which the NRC calls a... What is your terms on the NRC? They call it not even an incident, they call it a ventilation malfunction. And so, a lot of people don't know this, but in 2011 they had a scram. But more than 11, in January of 2012, they backed up into the core. They vented this thing. This thing is hot. They vented nuclear waste into the atmosphere. That's a fact, Jack. I'm the one that leaked this into the freaking domain. Me and other grassroots activists in the room that fought this for 50 years on cheat. They were cheating on the exchange. They were cheating. They were trying to save $100 million, and they were cheating, and they had a malfunction. We've been fighting this tooth and nail. But this delay is not our friend. This nuclear waste inside these canisters is 100,000 times safer than it ever is in those spent fuel pools. So let's finish this project. This is one of the greatest grassroots activist success stories in environmental history is the shutdown of San Onofre. One of the greatest in history by grassroots. Nobody thought we could do it. Oh, we did it. Let's finish this job. No more delays. Get this thing in the dry caster. And you said yourself, my question was the first one up at Austin. When I asked in your last thing, mine was that question. When you said, I said, once it's in the canisters, can you pull them out and move it to Texas? You said, not only absolute, yes we can, that is the plan. Well, we had consent-based hearings here, right? You said we could send it up in Idaho. Well, I live up there, and we could send it like a passed-out co-ed behind a dumpster we consented. But Texas, Rick Perry, they could send it. It's in the domain. Rick Perry says they want it. Texas has voted for it and everything. Let them have it. I'm going to finish it up. So let's finish. No more delays. Let's get this in the spent fuel pools. Let's work together on this thing, and let's finish off this incredible accomplishment of the shutdown of the most disastrous nuclear reactor in the world. Song. Shut it down. Finish this job.
Thank you, Kevin. Now we have Gene Stone. Then we're going to go to Donna Gilmore and Ray Lutz. Gene? Haven't started yet.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here tonight, and I'm glad the NRC is here to listen to our concerns. I want to say, first of all, that nuclear experts have got us where we are today, and we're in a crisis in America with nuclear waste. Some of us have talked about at Mike Levin's task force that it might be appropriate and time to get Congress to change the regulations of the NRC and perhaps change the funding so that you're no longer funded 90% by the nuclear industry. I'm glad you're here to listen, but I want to point out that hearing is a different thing. Hearing means that you listen to us and do what we are asking. And we are asking for you to be on site full-time, to keep active inspectors on the job site to inspect Edison's and Holtec work as it's been inferior so far. We feel and we demand full-time representation and responsibility by the NRC. I have two questions of Greg. Greg, what was the canister 30 that you spoke about earlier in the picture? What was the temperature and the radiation release when you had the vent open?
And Gene, get your second question out too.
Okay. No matter what cans are used, ultimately, there's still no real defensive depth. There is no way to deal with a leaking canister. And that is just moral wrong, morally just unacceptable that you would build a nuclear waste dump in our community without a way to fix a leaking canister. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Gene. And does the NRC understand the question?
I think so. You understand the question?
Did she answer in writing?
Answer it quickly. Temperature and radiation levels and canister while these meetings.
Yes,
Stand up, please.
So yeah, I had to ask, I wasn't sure what you were referring to with the venting, but you're referring to the drawer that was closed. So what happens, that's a shield protection. It's not to close off any radiation or anything coming from the canister. The canister is put down into the hole, the storage location, and then they slide that big thick lid over it for radiation shielding purposes until they can move the transporter and put the permanent lid on. For the time it was there, it was shielding the radiation, so radiation protection personnel were all around, and it was within expected values, and the temperature didn't change at all for the time that it was there.
Okay, so
as far as actual radiation levels, we can have our inspector get with the licensee and get what the readings were, and we can communicate that.
And Gene, you want to just put a follow-up on the record so they can think about that?
So great. What I'm asking are specific. You said, if I heard you right, that there were temperature and radiation levels taken. I'd like to know what those were, because as you know, I have taken these SafeCast readings with my own monitor at San Onofre, and SCE notified me that my radiations were right on the 30s, very close, very similar. So I want to know what radiation levels were that were coming out of that canister at that time, and what the temperature level, because we all know that the temperature tells us what's going on in the canister.
Right, thank you for asking, Gene. I think we may have mistaken the original intent of your question. If I understand you correctly, you were asking about canister 30 while it was sitting in the spent fuel pool building. I think we do have some of that data.
No. When it was on the ISPAS pad, when you had to sit there and you had to wait and you opened the canister, or was that inside?
Well, what Greg's statement was about, Southern California Edison taking temperature readings, radiation monitoring, that was on canister 30 while it was sitting inside the fuel building for those 11 months that they had suspended fuel loading. So we can go back and take a look at that data. I think we did document some of that in our July inspection report. Is that right, guys?
The appendix.
Right. So we can get with you. I think that data is in the inspection report. I don't have it on the top of my head, but we'll take that as a takeaway.
Thank you, Gene, for prompting that. We have done it.
Hi. Thank you, everybody, for coming to this. I know it's frustrating. Are any of you material engineers right here? I don't think so. I learned from the material engineers in NRC headquarters that these thin canisters, most in the country are 1/2 inch thick, ours are 5/8 inch thick. There is no ability to inspect for cracks, and even microscopic through-wall cracks can cause these to fail. There is no solution today for that. You're approving a system that can't be inspected. This idea that you can inspect, you're not inspecting for microscopic cracks, you're not inspecting for cracks, you're inspecting for some kind of surface thing. So I want to make it clear to everybody, they have no ability to inspect anything. And Chris Singh, the president of Holtec, that makes these, says that you can't repair them, and even if they could find a way to do it. So they've given us an uninspectable system. And then Scott Morris, last time, heard Doug Bowder at the CEP admit they can't put this stuff back in the pool. They have no plan on site if there's a leaking canister. Nothing, nada. Why would you ever approve a system when you actually had two CEOs that admitted they doubted that they could ever return the fuel to the pool? And it is a requirement of their license. And I know, Scott, I don't want you to answer because you kind of take too long. So I want people to have time to talk. And you don't even have to answer me because I'm just sharing with the public what's going on. And read the handout, go to San Onofre Safety, go to the sign the petition on San Onofre Safety. And people want to get organized and figure out a way to really solve this because it's not happening here. Then go here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dawn. And now we have Ray Lutz. And after that, we're going to go to Peter Stoop and Jackson Hinkle. Excuse me if I mispronounce your name. This is Ray Lutz.
Ray Lutz with Citizens Oversight. Thank you for being here. I just say that I'm a little bit disappointed that this is the first meeting you've had in the local area. At the very end, after you've already concluded your decisions, you should have been here earlier. That is bad.
Yes, that's true.
Bad behavior on your part. Secondly, the webinars. You didn't ask all the questions. There were many questions that were asked. The last one, you only let us ask procedural questions. You didn't get to the main questions. So I like the webinars because I don't have to go to Texas, but you didn't ask the questions that were asked. Now look, with only 29 canisters, you should have done 100% inspection, not a sampling inspection. This one thing is representative of how you do your job badly. What is it? Save some money by not inspecting a few more? You should have done 100% inspection with only 29 units to inspect, and you're finding bad stuff in the ones that you found. It wasn't that they were passing, they were all failing, and you didn't inspect them all. They had gouges. Now, my main complaint of this whole thing is that you didn't even look at design problems in this system. Let's face it, the design is bad from the start. These systems were never designed to be used for a long period of time. Now we're thinking about using them indefinitely according to your own paperwork. These systems were only designed as an interim fix so that they could get into Yucca Mountain. You're not considering the design. Now, Holtec, they scrape, they can't align, it gets stuck, almost falls in. You didn't even look at, was the design bad? Why didn't you consider design? Why didn't you go after it's all the procedures. SCE needs 20 people to make sure it gets lined up. We need cameras all over the place. Why? To fix a bad design. Why do you have this problem? It's because you approved the design and now you have a conflict of interest. You don't want to say that you made a mistake, so you can't look at the design. Wow. Bad situation inside the NRC.
Wow, that's a problem.
Now, this is why everyone says we need thicker canisters. You're damn right. These things are way too thin. They're not designed for the long term. I'm advocating 1,000 years with Helms, hardened extended life local monitored surface storage. You've got to get these double layer canisters, I believe, so that you can deal with them. Forget the single layer thing that was just to save money. Where are we going to put it? After what we saw here, we cannot trust SCE to move these things more than just a few feet. They can't be trusted to move 1,500 feet. How can they move it 1,350 miles over to New Mexico? Forget it, okay? So that's why we're saying the Pendleton option. Camp Pendleton is our only serious option to reduce our risk to a minimum. Move it 5 miles in and away from the coast and up at least 230 feet so we don't have Antarctica and Greenland melt and then underwater. So please, my question, why didn't you guys look at the design at all? Is it because you don't want to base it, that you approve something that was bad?
Okay, let's go for an answer. If you want to talk to
You packed quite a bit into that 3 minutes, and I'm just going to, but your final question I want to take on, why did you approve the design? So the design, and again, you may or may not agree with us, but it is what it is for right now.
You didn't consider the design in your review. You didn't review it.
Once again, I'm going to give you the answer if you let me try.
You're not answering the question. Excuse me, Chip. He's not answering my question. My question is, why didn't you review the design of this canister system? In other words, when it goes into that hole, why aren't there wheels to line it up so it doesn't scrape? That's a bad design for it to scrape, don't you think?
I understand you don't believe that the design is appropriate. I understand that.
Did you review it? Did you review the design in your process?
In fact, review the design.
No, I didn't see. There wasn't reviewed at all. In the process of this case, no review. Show it to me.
We look at the design all the time.
No, you did not review.
That's
It was not even on the SCE slide of review. They didn't include that.
The design is approved in a manner consistent with our regulations, and we continue to inspect every aspect of that design as part of the operational lifetime of the approved canister. So it's not, frankly, it's not fair to suggest that we didn't look at the design, because that's simply inaccurate.
Okay, that's the NRC's answer.
Okay.
There may not be agreement here, but
we're going to go on to Peter.
We have it on tape that you're lying about that.
And then we're going to go to Jackson Hinkle. And then Ted Quinn, Robert Wallace Jr. is here, and Torgan Johnson. This is Peter.
Hi, my name is Peter Stout. I'm from San Diego. I'm a concerned citizen. Mike, I have one question. It's a yes or no question for any one of you to answer. Does the NRC have any plan at all, to move this stuff off the beach within the next 10 years?
Thank you for the question. The answer is the NRC regulates the safe use. We are not the body that takes possession of the fuel. That's the Department of Energy. Okay, and ultimately it resides with the Department of Energy getting an application for a deep geologic repository consistent with federal requirements, congressionally mandated. The Nuclear Waste Policy Act of 1982 is law. It's the law of the land, and it says that the federal government shall take possession of this fuel by 1997. Well, guess what? It's 2019. 22 years have gone by, and the federal government has not taken possession of the fuel. Right? We all know that. Why is that? It's because your Congress has not provided the funding to make it happen. Okay? And that is why it's important that you engage your legislators and you engage other policymakers in Washington and elsewhere to take that particular issue about moving the fuel off the site to a more a long-term storage facility. It's not a technical issue. It's a budgetary. It's a financial issue. It's not being funded. The law of the land is what it is.
It's a technical issue, and it was fraudulent.
Okay. Thank you for that. We're going to Jackson Hinkle, and then we're going to go to Ted Quinn, Robert P. Wallace Jr., and I'd like Gary Hedrick to come up after that, and then we're going to go to some other people. Jackson Hinkle.
My name is Jackson Hinkle. I'm a 19, almost 20-year resident of San Clemente. I was born and raised there. And I've been working around the issue of San Onofre and nuclear waste storage for the past few years. I've briefed members of the United States Congress on the issue at San Onofre. I've helped current presidential candidates develop policy plans for nuclear waste storage moving forward. And I'm a candidate for San Clemente City Council. And I've attended most of the community engagement panel meetings over the past few years. And what I've seen is our community offering up a ton of ideas of what we can do to, aside from the big picture issue of moving the waste, away from San Onofre, get it off the beach 100 feet away from the shoreline. steps that our community could take with SoCal Edison and your help to create a safer storage situation in the interim. One of those things that Congressman Levin brought up was demanding full-time radiation monitoring at the plant. If you guys are in favor of that, if our congressman is in favor of that, then why can't we seem to make it happen? Who is supposed to be regulating SoCal Edison? Who is determining what they do and do not have to do? I think it's you guys, people like Levin, and that needs to be a top priority. Second of all, we've spoken many times, our community has, about removing the waste from San Onofre, and SoCal Edison has made their opinion known that they would love to get it off of the beach, and maybe if they spend as much money on their as they do on their marketing plan and their public outreach plan, and paying people that they have here tonight to come and spread ideas that everything is safe at the plant. Maybe if they spent that amount of money on working to get the waste out of San Onofre, we could have had a solution by now. Another really big thing that we need at San Onofre is a community action plan, community evacuation plan in case something were to go wrong at the plant. That is something that I think you guys in SoCal Edison should help fund and create for our community, considering we are the de facto stewards of the largest nuclear repository in the United States of America, 3.6 million pounds of nuclear waste sitting just 100 feet away from the shoreline. And lastly, I would encourage you all to take the voices that are here tonight, not as crazy nuclear activists, but as concerned residents who want to see the best for the future generation, people like myself. So thank you for being here and taking the time to consider our concerns.
Thank you. Ted Quinn, then Robert P. Wallace. Torgan, if he's here, would be next, and Gary Hedrick. Ted Quinn.
My name is Ted Quinn. I'm a nuclear engineer for 42 years. I worked for the NRC, ACRS in the late 1990s. I live here with my family 40 years as well. And I'm a member of the San Onofre Citizen Engagement Panel, a member of the Congressman Levin's task force. And I'm really pleased with you being here tonight. I was pleased with the congressman being here and seeing that the congressman's focus that many of us in the room do to provide the task force with fact-based, technical basis for much of what the congressman spoke about tonight. And I encourage the public to also use fact-based decisions in their input towards questions to you and in comments and in their investigation. Tonight, the whole focus is on the NRC's enhanced or accelerated or elevated enforcement actions. That's really what we're interested in. It has to do with the difference that you treat San Onofre than you would from Zion or from Vermont Yankee or one of the other decommissioned sites in the United States. And my question to you and asking you if you could document down the road of what the difference you see in the approach that you've had for San Onofre, the additional resources you've provided, as you've described tonight, but I'd like to see it in writing and in a table, of where all the specialization of inspectors you've sent, what they focused on, and how that benefits the safety issues that you see in the acceptance criteria that we all look for. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm hesitating to respond to every question because there's so many people that want to raise issues, and we could go all night. So I don't know. I honestly don't know how.
Make the table, distribute it later.
10, 30 seconds.
Go for it. Bang, bang, we want to hear it.
We can certainly document, and we have documented in our inspection reports, the inspectors by name and title who have been present at and observing the facility throughout all of this. So the actual names and titles of these people are a matter of public record already.
Compared with other plants.
Oh, compared to other facilities, we are leaning pretty far forward. This is far more aggressive an oversight regimen that we've been applying to San Onofre than we have at most of the other facilities. And if you really want the actual numbers, we can get those too.
Yeah, good.
Okay. Let's go to Mr. Wallace, then Torgan Johnson, then Gary Hedrick.
Hi, my name is Robert Wallace. I'm from the Verona Band of Mission Indians, and our people's been living out here in the mountains for some 12, 15, some say 20,000 years. And, you know, it just makes sense that a regulatory people would go and try to make those canisters safe. And I'm sure that everybody here, what we all want is we want transparency, right? We want transparency. We want you guys to come and tell us something better than 8 canisters. If you feel so comfortable about those little over 30% of canisters, go have one with your family. You know, because, you know, once one of those ignites, you know, everybody's going to be breathing a little bit of bad stuff, you know. Transparency, the canisters, but what about taking this to off-sites too? You know, taking it to New Mexico for one, you know, trying to maybe swindle and bribe a little bit and say, here, man, it's okay, you know. It's okay, just take a little bit of money and let us put this on your land. And, you know, we know, yeah, I know you smirk. You can smirk all you want, but you know what? It's what's going to happen, or that's what you guys are going to try to do. You're going to put it on a damn railway and take this all the way across the country, or at least halfway. What is it, 13,000 or 1,300 miles or whatever? I mean, that just doesn't make sense. I mean, containment, put it somewhere safe, something we don't have to worry about for another, shit, man, 100 years. So, I mean, but transparency, that's what we all want here. We want to be safe. We want our kids to be safe for a very long time, many generations. So thank you.
Thank you, Robert. We're going to Torgan and Gary, and I just want to tell you, we're going over the time allotted for the meeting, and I'm going to leave it up to the NRC staff to let me know how long they want to go, because we probably have about 30 more speakers. Torgan, go ahead.
Thank you. Torgan Johnson. I'm from the Samuel Lawrence Foundation. I'm on Congressman Logan's task force, and I'm a father of 4 downwind of San Onofre. And I think it's absolutely fundamental that you, the NRC, explain to the public that each of those thin-walled canisters that you showed in your PowerPoint presentation, each one of them contains 1,020 Hiroshima bombs worth of cesium-137 radiation. That allows the public to fully understand what you're allowing Southern California Edison to perpetrate on us. This also explain that there's no interim site in which to move this 124 canisters that are on the site right now at the ISFAC. Please clarify with the public that the canisters are stranded indefinitely or prone to corrosion cracking. You owe this much to the public. Please explain the logic of allowing Southern California to address serious engineering defects and fabrication defects of the transfer rig and the canisters and the resulting canister damage that shortens the life of the canisters, and how you're going to do that, why it might make sense to effectively or even logically address that with personnel training. That makes absolutely no sense. I'm professionally trained in building and planning. I'm Harvard trained in architecture and planning. That's absolutely insane. Talk to Boeing and FAA about addressing the MCAS system with more pilot training. They tried to do that, the pilots were outraged. And you're trying to perpetrate that on us right now. Explain to the public, please, that the decommissioning plan is to remove the buildings with the $4.4 billion collected from the public. With that, over 100,000 Hiroshima bombs worth of radiation in corroding canisters sitting 18 inches above groundwater in salty air near 2 major earthquake fault lines and in a tsunami inundation zone. That these canisters are going to be left there. We're going to clear the buildings away, spend $4.4 billion, but you're going to leave the site with an ISFAC sitting there like a ticking time bomb.
Okay. Thank you, Torgan.
Why are you not recalling grossly faulty and defective engineering? Engineering this bad hides more surprises yet unknown. A nuclear disaster with San Onofre's mountain of nuclear waste is more likely from engineering error than it is even from terror.
Thank you, Torgan.
16 seconds left.
So I'm going to stand up for this one because this one's important. This is an important point. Thank you for your comment. I have to talk about this Hiroshima bomb thing. I have to. Because I'm sorry. Can everybody hear me? Okay. We all need to be grounded in factual information. We really do. And I would implore you to just listen to me for 30 to 60 seconds, okay? The fuel the used fuel, okay, is a material that is a solid, okay? It is not a liquid, it is not a gas. It is a solid, okay? They're made little pellets about the tip, about the length of my knuckle to my top of my finger, pellets. And those pellets are loaded inside zircaloid pins, okay? So if you can imagine a very thick straw made of zircaloid, which can withstand thousands of degrees. These solid fuel pellets are loaded into those pins, and those pins are sealed, welded shut. And then those pins are taken and putting into assemblies, sometimes arrays of 12 by 12 arrays, okay? When you look at nuclear fuel, what the picture that you saw of being loaded into that canister was a fuel assembly. Multiple pins, probably 144 or so pins, with these solid pellets inside of them. So there's already one barrier to any release of radioactive material. The first barrier is that zircaloid cladding around pellets. Okay. Separate from that, there are the amount of time that has occurred since that plant was shut down is now on the order of 7+ years, right? There's a concept called decay heat, and I'm not going to make you engineers, but what I will tell you is, when a plant is operating at 100% power, the minute all those control rods are shut down, put into the core, there is no more fission taking place inside of that reactor. So this concept of an explosion of nuclear fuel is completely inaccurate. There is no more fission. Let me finish. There is no more fission taking place. However, there is an immense amount of heat still being generated by the fission, the products of the fission. So when uranium atoms are split, it splits into what we call fission products. There's a variety of isotopes at play. They continue to decay and generate heat, and they also release radiation, okay? And it's all related, the heat and the radiation. But there's no more fission, okay? Fission is stopped. The second those rods go in the core, the heat output from the reactor is now 7%. Within a couple days, it's less than 0.5%. After 8 years, it's hundredths of a percent. The amount of heat that's being generated by the fuel in these canisters right now that have been sitting there in pools for 7+ years, some of them longer than that, is minuscule compared to the amount of heat that was generated when that plant was operating at 100% power, generating electricity. So my point is, there is no fission taking place. There can be no explosion. Is there radiation? Absolutely. There are fission products that remain in there and could be hazardous for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Okay? That's absolutely true. That radioactive material that remains has to be contained. It's contained in those fuel pins that are welded shut, and it's contained in those canisters.
Okay.
That is a fact.
So thank you. And I feel that Torgen, I'm going to give you
You said that there would be a chance
Go ahead,
of this. I would like the NRC to show the studies, the Nuclear Waste Technical Review Board report of 2017, December 2017, that talks about the hydrides inside of this fuel. It talks about the pressurization of the canisters. It talks about the damaged fuel cladding, and talks about the damaged fuel pellets. Defense in depth, it's three things. It's a ceramic pellet, it's the zirconium cladding, and it's a canister. We've got 3 of those that are damaged.
Okay.
Explain that to the public.
Thank you, Torgen.
Hydrogen
And
gas explosion.
You heard Torgen.
You're
overstating it, sir. This is Gary Hendricks.
That's how they get.
And I want to go next to Lindsay Bissett, and then Micah Geary and Jeff Steinmetz.
Good evening. My name is Gary Hedrick. My wife and I started San Clemente Green in 2007. 2010, we were approached by workers with a good moral compass who work at the plant to share information with us that actually turned out to be true in 2012 when the steam generators failed as they warned. And ever since then, I've done my best to be realistic, not alarmist or anything. I'm trying to get facts the way we heard tonight. But we continue to be in touch with people that work at the plant. And we continue to hear stories that are unbelievable when you think about how much is at risk here. The people we want in charge are like the people I heard described when they defined the mission of the NRC. But these guys are not fulfilling that mission. I'm sorry to say, because I feel like over the years I've had personal relationships with these people, but they're not to be trusted. And they're doing the bare minimum when they should be taking advice like what Torgen was mentioning, the Nuclear Waste Technical Review Board, which is a branch of the National Academy of Science, totally independent. They're warning Congress and NRC and Edison, anyone that's dealing with commercial waste or weapons. They're saying there's a serious possibility that stress corrosion cracking can result in breach of the canister, and that hydrogen gas can build up inside just while they're sitting still. It doesn't even take into account a damaged canister from a fall. And tonight, I just want to bring up one question, even though there's several, but it illustrates the problem pretty well. We had Tom Palmisano lie to us at a meeting like this, totally evading the truth about a canister drop that almost happened, and he had no repercussions. He was not called out by the NRC. Nobody challenged him. He's still continuing to spew whatever he wants and expecting us to believe it. He should have been dismissed, get someone else in there, and instead we have the NRC just kind of condoning everything. They're not doing anything till something serious happens. I can't even believe you don't have a full-time inspector on site when there's so much at risk. And it sounds to me like you've defined a system that is experimental. You're experimenting with this process, and when it fails, you cover it up. You don't deal with the truth. And I would like to know, what would you have done if that canister had fallen 18 feet, which you wouldn't have known of, and none of this would have been discussed if it hadn't been for a whistleblower? What would you have done if that canister dropped 18 feet? And I know your studies show that, well, the interior, the fuel would have been damaged, but the canister wouldn't have been breached. Well, I can tell you for damn sure it would have been misshapen. And when it landed in the bottom of that silo, it wouldn't have been easy to retrieve from there. And my question is to you, let's just say that happened. What would be our recourse? What do we have on site that's going to protect us when something happens? Because it will happen. It's happened in the past. We never expect it till it happens, and you guys should be on it ahead of it. If you were there on site during that downloading when it almost fell, would you have been able to prevent it? Would you have caught that? You should have been there.
Gary, let's see if they can offer anything on that. Thank you. Thank you.
Good job, Gary. Thanks, Gary. Appreciate it. So the short answer to the question, and we could have a long conversation about this, the short answer to this question, our entire approach to regulation is based on a graded approach based on safety risk. Okay, so we apply our resources to those areas that we regulate that are at the greatest risk. Clearly, power reactors operating at 100% around the country presents a much more significant risk. Agree with me or not? I think I can safely say that there's far greater risk applied to a 100% operating reactor than there is to cold fuel that's been sitting in a pool for 7+ years. As a consequence, we apply our resources, our oversight resources, in a manner that's consistent with putting our resources where the most risk is. What I've tried to explain today is that the ISFACs, the dry fuel storage facilities, do not represent a substantial risk relative to these other entities that we regulate. However, given the situation that we have observed here, given the history, given the incident, we have leaned very far forward and have been very aggressive in our oversight and have expended vastly more resources as an agency at this site than we have at virtually any other dry fuel storage facility in the country. If the cask had actually dropped, you would have seen a much different, a much more aggressive regulatory response. Again, because... Okay, I understand, guys. I understand. You simply can't, you can have everything you want as long as you have an infinite amount of resources, okay? And that's simply not the case. We have to judiciously apply our resources where the greatest risks are posed.
It's our court.
I think we need to go. Gary,
just a quick, I just want to point out that the more you talk, the more you undermine your credibility. And I think that you're continuing to undermine your credibility by not having a full-time inspector there. That's the least you can do.
Okay. This is Ms. Bissett. And then we're going to go
Why do they bring people that know what they're talking about?
Mike Aguirre, and then to Jeff Steinmetz. Go ahead.
You want to cue
Good
up?
evening. I'm Lindsay Bassett. I'm a third-generation Californian. I'm a mother of 4 young children. We live 30 miles away from San Onofre. We've been deeply entrenched in this public safety issue since 2011 when I was pregnant with our third child. When the Fukushima accident happened, we had iodine 131 that burned our agave. We knew that it came across 5,000 miles. We were pissed. So in 2013, my husband and I, after 2 years of trying to get local city councils, regional elected officials to come into this fight and address this public safety issue, we finally brought in the Prime Minister of Japan, Naoto Kan, who spoke to his experience of dealing with the Fukushima disaster. And he basically said if the worst case scenario had happened, he lost control of the spent fuel pools, he would have had to evacuate 190 miles out, including metropolitan Tokyo with 50 million residents. So I have a little bit of experience dealing with this issue. I just wanted to say after, you can see here, you've got full capacity here during this workshop. The public is angry. The public does not trust that you're regulating Southern California Edison, Holtec International. They don't trust what you're doing here. What are you doing? You claim that there are adequate changes and improvements that have taken place by Southern California Edison, worker training, inspections, cameras on site. Thank you. However, I think when you pull back the lens and you look at the big picture, nothing's really changed. We still are continuing to use a defective Holtec nuclear waste storage system, just 100 feet from the beach, where families recreate. Okay? We're continuing to use inferior thin-walled canisters that we know get gouged upon downloading. These gouged thin canisters, within 16 years' time, this has been proven in South Africa, will have through-wall corrosion cracking in a coastal environment. We know we have no method to deal with leaking canisters on site. There's no hot cell, you're demolishing the spent fuel pools. And we know also that once there's a leaking canisters, there's no place to take these leaking canisters in the nation. They're going to maybe go off-site, and then they'll return to San Onofre. So, as a result, what do we have here? San Onofre is going to become the de facto permanent nuclear waste dump.
Until it's an evacuation zone.
I'm almost done.
Okay.
I think the rational and moral imperative today has got to be, and it's really this elementary, one, stop loading the nuclear waste into these thin-walled Holtec canisters. We've got to stop, pause, and reassess, please. Number two, we need to replace all the canisters with thick-walled casks up to 19 inches thick, not 5/8 of an inch thick, up to 19 inches thick. Yes. We know that these survived the 2011 Fukushima earthquake and tsunami. I'm almost done. We need to then move these thick casks to higher ground. We know this. Okay? okay? This is common sense. So I think what we're seeing here is your public is telling you what it's demanding. Please listen. This is common sense. And do it.
Okay,
And just
thank you.
one last thing. One last thought. The small probability of catastrophe is unacceptable when the downside could be of regional or global consequence. Don't let San Onofre be the next regional or global nuclear disaster. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to use the first minute of my time to allow the audience to show their agreement with what Lindsay just said about the whole text system being an inferior system that should be recalled. And if anyone has a lemon or would like to have a lemon, you can raise it up now. If you want a lemon, I have a few extras. And I'd like you to come forward graciously, and we'll walk forward. And we'd like to give these lemons to our NRC representatives because we feel the system is a lemon. And so I'd like to invite everybody to come forward right now.
Okay.
Could you hand them down?
Single file.
Can you hand them
And
down?
done within 35 seconds.
And
Do it.
you're gonna
Yes,
have
Scott,
to
you
go
got
back
lemon,
to your
Scott.
seats after this, rather than-
Hold up your lemon, Scott.
Okay.
Oh, and here's a rock. Give that one to Scott.
I grew up here.
Have a rock lemon.
Wake up. Anything else that you want to say? Kristen, do you have anything else you want to say? Okay. So, Kristen.
I have the remainder of my minute. I'd like to say this.
Oh, shit, I dropped the ball.
Mr. Morris and Ms. Hall.
Okay.
I have two questions, and I request that you answer these in writing, your response in writing, whether or not you can answer the question. If you could get the technical information from a technical expert, that would be appreciated. And if you could send the information to Donna Gilmore of San Onofre Safety, that would be very much appreciated. So please consider these formal questions. Number one, will you allow the public access to all the readings from the Arriva ISFAC outlet air vents, all that's available, what's there, as much as you have, as much as Edison has from day one? We need to know whether those canisters are already releasing radiation.
You said Arriva.
Arriva, yes.
Arriva
Number, if you have
homes,
questions,
yes.
you can ask me later. Number two, in the last special inspection report, you evaluated a potential drop of a canister. You said there wouldn't have been a breach, all that. Then you said, however, quote, the condition of the fuel after the postulated drop would not meet the licensing requirements for storage or transport. The licensing would be required to either significantly evaluation or supplementing operations to ensure the safe retrieval, unloading, and repackaging of the fuel while minimizing the dose to personnel. My question is, how and where would Edison retrieve and package the fuel?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Krista. And we're going to go to Mike Geary and Jeff Steinmetz next, but we're over the time, and we only have the facility until 10 o'clock, so we're going to go to 9:30 and give the NRC staff a chance to talk with you. If you want to come up and talk to them informally, whatever, and then we have to be out of here by 10 o'clock. So we're going to Mike Geary now, and then we'll go to Jeff Steinmetz if he's still here. Oh, there he is. Okay, Mike, go ahead.
My approach to all of this is heavily influenced by the fact that I'm a former federal prosecutor that investigated organized crime, and I'm a certified fraud examiner, and I've been an attorney for many, many years. And Scott, my investigation shows that you knew that Southern California Edison had failed to report to the NRC within the 24-hour period required what happened, that the whistleblower disclosed with the incident back in 2017. You knew that. and you conspired with...
Can you say the dates?
2018.
2018.
You said
con-
2017.
I'm sorry, 2018. You conspired with Southern California Edison to cover up the fact that they had failed to make that report. You knew that they didn't make the report. You admitted in prior proceedings before the engagement panel that you knew and that you had those conversations. You also knew, and the NRC knew, that Edison used canisters that were too small. And as a result of that, when they used the regular ones, they came in constant conflict with the silos. And you knew that they didn't report that. You also knew that they used canisters that had the wrong shims in them, and they were not approved canisters. You knew that as well. Now, you've been sued. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission is being sued right now in the United States District Court for the Southern District of California for failure to turn over Freedom of Information Act documents. First, they said that we're not going to turn them over because you are a commercial operation and we want you to pay tons of money. Then they said, okay, well then you're not a commercial operation. We have to get SCE's permission. Okay, well we got SCE's permission, but now we can't turn them over because it's all law enforcement related. So you have to understand that everything that Scott is saying, everything the NRC is saying here, was the subject of intense documentation. We requested the documentation to see if what Scott and his people here were saying was true. They've refused to turn that over. Right now, the case is pending before a United States District Court here in the Southern District of California. So my question to you is this, Scott. Will you release all the information that we requested from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission regarding this matter under the Freedom of Information Act? Thank you.
You asked me a direct question, and you said it yourself, Mike. It's in the court system, so we have to respect the court system. I'm not going to subvert the legal system.
No, you are a party to the proceeding, and you have the absolute right to consent to the release of the documents. That is totally dishonest, what you just did.
Actually, what's dishonest, and not to be argumentative, because I don't want this to turn into an argument.
Oh, no, that
But you have, in fact, impugned my character and attributed things to me that are simply untrue.
That's not true. But wait a minute. Scott, it's very simple.
It's untrue, Michael.
Will you agree, as a party to the litigation...
I've said what I had...
Will the nuclear... Yeah, see, you're dodging the question
again.
No,
I'm not.
You can't... I just wish I hoped to get to your deposition sometime.
Listen, for everybody's benefit, the incident occurred on a Friday. On Monday, I got a call. So in fact, I was notified.
Yeah, but you didn't.
I was notified. The issue that was the subject to our Michael, you said your piece. It's my turn.
No, you're lying.
I am
You're
not
supposed
lying.
to make a public report of it.
Okay, listen.
You're supposed to make a public report of it.
You have not let me finish.
Okay, go ahead.
No, I'm going to finish this.
Go ahead.
The gentleman has made a lot. He's impugned my character, and I'm not willing to let it stand.
You can't impugn character that's already been impugned.
Okay, look, I'm sorry.
You've taken this down into the sewer, Michael. You gotta get your facts straight.
You violated, you obstructed justice, Scott.
He's
You
not going to
obstructed
say
justice.
it. It's time for you to sit down. He's not going to say it.
You're an attorney, you know that. You're an attorney, you're a trained attorney that works for the nuclear industry. He's a trained attorney that works for the nuclear industry.
Okay.
Yes, you do.
Jeff Steinmetz.
What motive would I possibly have?
Good job, Mike. Okay, so the first thing Scott said pretty much when he walked up here says, we follow the NRC principles of regulation. Scott, that was a lie.
No, it wasn't.
Yes, it was. Because, and here I'm going to show you why it was a lie. Okay. It is a license requirement that
Are you going to let me respond?
No, not yet. When I'm done, you can't. I want my time back.
You can have it.
It is a license requirement that Southern California Edison be able to retrieve the fuel, and this should have been done with the loaded canisters that had the shim pin issues. The fact is, the NRC doesn't know the condition of the fuel or the support systems within those canisters. Yet the NRC has not mandated Southern California Edison retrieve the fuel as per the license requirements. Southern California Edison, Doug Bowder, openly admitted at the last CEP meeting, SCE cannot retrieve the fuel back into the pools. Scott, you were asked about this at the last meeting. Have you done an investigation about that? It is a license requirement.
Yes, we have.
There is a good reason for this. Why the Southern California Edison can't put it back in the pools. It's because the NRC is allowing them to load the high burn-up fuel without enough cooling time and too densely within the Holtec canisters. The NRC is fully aware they are allowing Southern California Edison and other utilities to load fuel too hot into the canisters to meet the retrievable fuel requirement. They are clearly not following the principles of regulation. If they were, the NRC would have opened the investigation, and they have not. Canister number 30 sat for over 11 months with a fully loaded canister, very hot, without being licensed for this longer-term purpose. Southern California Edison and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission was continually asked how they were cooling this canister that was not licensed for this long-term purpose, and we were never told. Also, if the NRC is following more principles of regulation and this canister was never licensed for this long-term storage, the fuel should have been returned to the pools per the required license, and it was not. You are not following your requirements. The gouged canisters were not properly inspected because the technology to inspect them properly does not exist. When they say that they're using these cameras to actually look at these, it's insufficient. It doesn't do the job that's needed to actually look for the microscopic cracks. This was admitted to the NRC Chairman Wright in 2008 during a Nuclear Regulatory Commission meeting. But more importantly, the NRC approved a system that scratches the canisters from top to bottom.
Okay, Jeff, I'm going to give you a few more seconds because you did lose some.
Yeah,
But
okay.
please finish up.
The 95% confidence interval is based on a statistical analysis submitted by Southern California Edison to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission that both the NRC and Southern California Edison will not provide to the public, though they've been asked for this information multiple times. You're not being, and Scott, you actually under oath at the Congressman Rauda's meeting with Congressman Levin there, you were under oath, you said that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission always strives to actually be open and forthright regarding its decisions. This 95% statistical analysis was the big part of the basis for resuming the loading of the fuel, yet you won't provide that information to the public.
Jeff.
You perjured yourself under oath.
Okay, I think you can stop with that one. Thank you. Let's see how many people we can get on. So I'm going to call about 5 names here, and how about Larissa Stone? Larissa Stone, and then William Weigel Jr., Clay Truax, Stephen Vogue, Beth Leeds, and I think it's Bernice, and frankly, I don't know. I couldn't read the writing, and so we have Larissa.
I think it's really important for us to take a moment and to go on the inside. We've spent a lot of our energy listening and sharing a lot of what's going on in our minds, what's going on in our emotions. But to take a moment and just to close our eyes and to go in. And to feel into all those beings that have lost their lives because of nuclear radiation. To feel into all the families, the mothers and the fathers, the sisters and the brothers, the sons and the daughters, the best friends, who have lost the most beautiful, precious connections and lost a piece of themselves. And to feel into the depth of what these lives mean to us. And as we honor those lives that have been lost, we can feel into our own families, into the preciousness of our community. And we all know why we are here and what drew us here today. It's because we care. It's because we love. We love each other. So I ask you all, what would love do? Not, can we cut corners? Or what is within the scope of acceptable? But truly, what would love do? And what I'm hearing from this beautiful community, and I know there's a lot of emotions, and I know we can get triggered by that emotion, but what I'm hearing consistently is that this community is asking for exceptional safety. And what I'm hearing is that we want thick-walled canisters because that is really what's going to make it more safe. And my question to you all is, what would it take for us to be heard? What would it take for us to be heard as a community to make the difference, to bring this forth, to bring forth the thick-walled canisters? Thank you.
William? Okay. William Michael Jr.
Good evening. I'm William Weigel, a retired Air Force judge advocate, about 20 years. I look at the San Onofre situation as being unique. I believe the NRC totally failed when they granted a blanket environmental impact statement that said it was okay to bury nuclear waste at every existing nuclear reaction site. San Onofre is unique because it's on a military installation, and one thing I learned as a young judge advocate is there are laws of war, and we've heard how safe these are, 5/8 of an inch thick. The canisters are too heavy for terrorists to lift up, I guess, so we shouldn't worry about it. They might crack, they might not, but I'll tell you what, because they're on a military installation, they're a legitimate target of war. And I do not believe the NRC has done its homework and done its duty to provide for public safety by ensuring that those canisters are hardened against enemy attack in the event of war. And that has to be done, and it has to be moved. You should revoke the permit and insist that these be moved to a safer place, or at least put in canisters that would have sufficient size and thickness and be in a hardened facility to where if they are attacked by the enemy, they're unlikely to go off. I mean, that's what we do with all of our other munitions. We safeguard them. These things are sunning on the beach right now. It's a joke. It's an absolute joke. And you should be ashamed of yourself.
Thank you. And Clay, you want to come up? This is Clay Truax coming up. And then we'll try Stephen Vogue and Beth Leeds and the name I can't pronounce. Clay.
Hello. I'd like to thank the Nuclear Regulatory Commission for this opportunity to speak to you.
We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay. I wanted to thank the Nuclear Regulatory Commission for this opportunity to speak to you. As an Orthodox Jew, I take the concept of tikkun olam very seriously, or to heal the world. And to me, thin-walled canisters in the tsunami zone in an environment of global warming is not tikkun olam. There is no long-term storage facility. It is on hold indefinitely. We have the ocean come up. I assume things are going to decay. something like a hurricane strikes or a tsunami, I would expect that the canisters will rupture. Then a lot of radiation will be released. And not to get into hyperbole, but then it's Chernobyl time. Well, that's largely what I have to say. I would just as soon leave my time to other people.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Very considerate. And Stephen vote? Here's Stephen, and then, is that Beth?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So, my name is Dr. Stephen Bose, and from what I've seen here earlier, especially with the video that you put on, Mr. Warnick, certainly you guys are doing a great job of trying to clean up after the messes that have been occurring. As the Congressman said earlier, they just keep coming on, don't they? So, although it's laudable that you've been doing a lot of work on procedural things, it does beg the question, why did all this stuff have to keep happening in the meantime? It seems like there's been a lack of foresight and forethought so that this stuff wouldn't have to keep happening, so you wouldn't have to keep investigating so thoroughly. And so it also begs another question. When's the next one going to happen? If they keep happening, doesn't, since you guys are into statistics, doesn't it seem that statistically we could just have another one right away, couldn't we? I have a couple of questions because I have a hard time understanding what's going on with you folks. Very specific questions I'd love to have an answer to. And I'll be a bit redundant, but at least it's in question form. Since the stainless steel containers are located 108 feet from the beach, and since it's known that salt water is a major trigger for chloride-induced stress corrosion cracking in stainless steel, and since a small leak in one canister could release as much radiation as was released by Chernobyl, why have you opted to store these canisters so close to the salt water, especially as earthquakes, tsunamis, and increasing ocean levels are distinctly probable? That's the first question. The second one is, and again it sounds somewhat redundant, since thick wall casts are used in most of the world, presumably because most of the world's scientists deem this to be the safest method, and since the Holtex 5/8" canisters have no way to be inspected, and they're estimated to only have efficacy to contain radiation for only 25 years, and go for 40 if you like, whatever, before they leak, rather than thick wall casts can be maintained and monitored to prevent leaks and explosions. And since uranium-233 has a half-life of over 159,000 years, and plutonium a half-life of 24,000 years, why have you opted to use these thin wall canisters instead of thick 10 to 19-inch thick wall canisters? Why? Those are my two questions. I await your response.
Okay, they have the questions. We're running late. I'm going to get 3 more speakers on. So Stephen can talk to them after the forum closes. Thank you. We have Beth Leeds, and then we're going to get Robert Johnson, and I think we're going to have a tremendous close with the group back here. Okay?
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to give some of my time to answer his question.
No, we're not giving time to answer anything.
I'll answer it then.
Good, you answer.
I'm going to answer
You
it.
answer.
Well, I'm going to say we did everything we could. Don't worry about it. We're taking care of it. We have a lot of different reports and everything, and we will make them clear to you. So don't worry, because I believe that they will make those reports to us that we want, because we're asking it, right? Okay, I have a few things to say. I would like all the 20 canisters, I think they should all be inspected if they can be inspected. I wrote something down that I thought was really important. The intake levels of radiation are being tested and checked at the bottom of the tanks, but the outtake level of radiation levels to the upper part of the tank were exempted from being tested by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission at the request of Areva, the company doing the testing. So a company doing the testing is wanting to be exempt.
Edison, yeah.
That makes sense for them, but not for us, because we're here honestly. We took time out here because we care enough to tell them, because they're the people who count, right? They're sitting there, 4 people, there's more people in the room. They're the people that need to help us, because we're sitting ducks, well, they are while they're here, but they don't have to be here that long. We count. So please, take care of us. That's all we're asking. Isn't that all we're asking? Just take care of us.
We count.
I want to also say that nukes are scary. Don't use any more of those 1/2-inch or 5/8-inch canisters anymore, and fire hold tech and those people that make those canisters, because we should be having thick canisters, or I mean, we should be having the best possible. I don't care if they're 20 inches thick, 30 inches thick, whatever needs to be done. Please listen to us.
Thank you.
And I do have 2 certificates of appreciation for each of you, because you came, and I know you're going to listen to us.
Okay. Doctor?
Can I,
Roger
I'm sorry
Johnson,
to interject,
and then
but
we
I've
have-
really got to make a request. For
Okay.
whatever reason, the host seems to just be bouncing around the list, not actually going down the list from the order of people who signed up.
You can go back to your
So
camera.
I'm just requesting another 10 minutes
You
of
can
people
go back to
that
your.
really want to
You
speak.
can go back to your camera. Thank you.
No, actually,
No, you can go back to where you came from.
Okay, we have Dr. Woods.
Okay, there's important people that need to speak here tonight, and he's just skipping over their names. So especially the people from Public Watchdogs, they've done extensive work on this issue. They need the time to talk. So we go an extra 10 minutes and less chit chat at the end. Does that sound good to you guys?
We want to hear from Public
Okay, we're going
Watchdog.
to Dr. Woods. We'll call on one
I don't need to
person
speak.
from
I would
the-
love to, but
the
I really would
watchdog.
like them to have a chance to
Okay,
speak.
fine.
I'm
Thank you.
sorry I spoke.
Go ahead.
Thank you. One of the things that disturbs me about tonight is the trivialization. You come here to trivialize the dangers of radiation, and it's not safe. It's extremely dangerous. Let's put this in perspective. We're reading about in Russia, Western Russia, releases of radiation, and what happened was first a total denial, then they covered it up. Then there was deception, then they lied about it, then they admitted it was worse than they expected. And the number one priority is to prevent the public from feeling there's any danger to anything nuclear. Let's take another example in the world. All the fuss, world headlines about Iran, and they're increasing their uranium. There's 5,000 times as much uranium right here. Now, which way is it? Whichever way it is, then there is in all of Iran. 5,000 times as much. We've talked about the failure of the canisters extensively. We don't talk about other kinds of dangers. For example, missile attacks, airplane crashes, truck bombs, and so on. I wonder if the NRC knows about the Israel missile that they sell on the open market. Has a range of 200 miles. It's designed to be concealed in container ships. There's millions of containers right off the coast here. It can hit the target in 10 minutes. It can blow these things up completely. We're not talking about microscopic cracks. There's all kinds of dangers, and we need to be worried about them. We're not worried about a nuclear explosion. We all know. So we don't need to lecture about the pellets. Okay, we know the danger is radiation, massive amounts of radiation. Dr. Resnikoff says that each one of those canisters can release more cesium-137 than all of Chernobyl. So there is a real danger, and the danger is radiation, not nuclear explosions. We realize that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're gonna go to Nina and Charles, okay? They're gonna be our last two speakers after this group. And Nina and Charles, I think, are coming up here. And please introduce yourself to us. Go ahead.
Sure. Good evening. Thank you for hosting tonight. I'm Chelsea Sparty with the Samuel Lawrence Foundation, and we appreciate your step to listen to community voices here at the source. It's August 2019. Everyone remembers August 2018. When the unthinkable happened, a fully loaded canister of high-level radioactive waste nearly dropped 18 feet on your watch. What is different today? What has changed? You've told us SCE management failed to establish a rigorous process to ensure adequate procedures, training, and oversight guidance. What actions did you improve? And why should we believe you? When somehow everyone was asleep at the switch a year ago. I stand here observing NRC and SCE, you can't handle the workload now. What is going to happen when more nuclear plants close? When 20 years go by and storage canisters are severely damaged? When a natural disaster overwhelms an interim storage facility of nuclear waste? There are already massive floods at Cooper Nuclear in Nebraska, hurricanes passing over Turkey Point in Florida, tornadoes whipping by Calvert Cliffs in Maryland, wildfires and earthquakes damaging land around San Onofre. NRC, you are overwhelmed, and it shows. This is an incredible volume of nuclear waste. Do more than oversight. Do more than watch with binoculars from Washington, D.C. Ensure public safety and innovate by showing us that in a few years' time, the NRC can develop and approve a procedure to repackage thin-walled canisters into thick casks. We need to do this to ensure the safety and the health of people and our environment. You are charged with ensuring the regulation and safety of nuclear power in the USA. Instead of pivoting to the expansion of small modular reactors, get in there and deal with the nuclear waste you already left behind in your wake. You know the community wants you to stop loading thin-walled canisters, so what is it going to take for us to repackage this waste? From thin canisters to thick casks. The approval of that repackaging procedure would reduce worry in Southern California and beyond. This single regulatory action would prove that the NRC is striving to achieve their mission, so do it.
Yeah.
Prove it to us.
Yeah.
Help us believe you when you say that you're protecting our health and safety. Repackage waste in thick casks.
Okay. Thank you.
So here we have ladies, Coco and Enzo.
Good evening. My name is Lace Johnson. I am Enzo Johnson. In 2011, when Lace was 4 and I was 2 years old, our family became aware of the dangerous public safety issue taking place at San Onofre Nuclear Generating Station, only 30 miles from our home in North County, San Diego. Now that I am 10 and Lace is 12, we are able to speak for ourselves, and we are asking all of you adults today to help ensure the safety of children like us throughout California for generations to come. Please do not allow Holtec International to abandon radioactive waste and thin-walled canisters on our beautiful California beaches.
These thin-walled canisters that over time will crack in the salty coastal environment just 100 feet from the beach will become a nightmare for our Pacific Ocean, marine wildlife, and ocean lovers like our family who swim, surf, and sail in this paradise we call home. And once these canisters crack open, releasing radiation into the surrounding environment, it is the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the food that we're nourished by that becomes poisonous to our bodies. Please make the responsible choice here today, while we still have good options, as we don't want to inherit your mistakes. Stop loading San Onofre's nuclear waste into thin-walled canisters. Replace all canisters with thick casks. Move the waste to higher ground.
Thank you for listening and doing everything you can to protect the future of us Californians.
I'm Charles Langley with Public Watchdogs, and I feel uncomfortable coming up here when I know there are people who signed up ahead of me, but I have 3 questions, and I think they're important. One, how do you upload a cracked canister? 2, what is the seismic rating on a cracked canister? And 3, what is the seismic structural rating on the concrete viscosity, the pad? And I'm asking this question because I've talked to metallurgists who say that through-wall cracking and austenitic 316L stainless steel can occur in as few as 2 years. Thank you.
That's true. That's true. Is that something you could, can you answer that quickly?
No.
We'll give it our best try, Charles.
Yeah, so I wrote down the questions and we'll get the information. I don't have it readily available right now.
Okay. Is it Nina? Or
Nina, actually. Nina Babiars with Public Watchdogs. I also serve on Congressman Levin's task force, and we're moving forward on the risk assessment. It's really never been done for the ISFAC, but the only risk assessment we've ever had done is the quote from the emergency planning exemptions of Edison: the plant is closed and the risk is low, which is absolutely irrelevant to the risk, Scott, that we're really talking about here in our community. But I really only have one question, and I'm going to frame it up and leave it with you, and leave it with our community as well. We all are only here because we had a whistleblower that had the integrity to step forward and check Palmisano's bold-faced lies at the August 9th meeting last August. And so my question to you is going to be based on the fact that we didn't have a whistleblower, we wouldn't be here tonight. We wouldn't have had an inspection, we wouldn't have had PECs, we wouldn't have had final reports, preliminary reports, we wouldn't have any of this. And so when I looked at your March 18th preliminary report, and I see on one of the last pages that one of the revelations that was a result of an employee survey was that there was